And so when we just started with our platform, we were working with kind of legacy databases. And that was good enough because we had up to a dozen customers. They didn't really use the platform as heavily. We didn't really prove the ROI yet. And so it was kind of good enough. But when we started releasing a future version and when our customer base started growing, we started noticing that there is a big lag when a customer actually wants to, for example, create a predictive profile, who they're going after, when they want to build an audience and start sending emails and ads to those audiences. When we wanted to start onboarding maybe 5 customers that week, we started seeing great lags. Maybe sometimes a customer would have to wait 6 hours, 12 hours, even 2 days if they create multiple segments. And that's where we decided that our existing kind of legacy monolithic infrastructure might not be a perfect fit for where we are. And we started looking around into other technologies. And so that's when we started looking into a little bit of both open source as well as proprietary technologies. And I'll hand it over to Prithvi as soon as the presentation will be ready, who's going to discuss exactly what are the kind of different alternatives were in the market, what kind of characteristics and attributes we were looking for when we were looking into open source and proprietary technologies, what were the things that we were looking for in terms of business impact, the 3 challenges that we had, and then how we were able to address those 3 challenges. So Prithvi, if you're ready, if this is working now, still not working? Okay, let me go to that area over there and I'll support you with the presentation.
Okay. Yeah, so Gil talked a little bit about the big overview of what we do at Metadata. I want to get into the inner workings of what we do and exactly how we do it and how we're able to accomplish all the things with Aerospike. So that is not our slide. Yeah, it's a cool map. So let's talk about use cases. What are we using this for? One of our use cases was custom audiences and lookalike profiles. And this is what our customers use to actually kind of target their marketing campaigns towards. So basically, we were kind of sticking with the traditional SQL database solutions. And that was fun because it's popular, it's super familiar, everyone knows about it, it's easy to get started with. And that was fine at that time and sufficient for our needs. But we started growing and we started gaining more customers, and our existing customers wanted to build more custom audiences and profiles, and we had new customers coming, so we kind of started growing exponentially, and our traditional SQL database just wasn't that good enough. If you're trying to do any sort of search, full text search on that, it's just not going to work as well. And basically, we want to make sure that we're able to get to our customers and deliver to them anything they want on demand. We don't want to be able to just address solutions for 5 customers. We want to be able to scale this out to 20, 100, 300 customers, and we don't want to be able to have any sort of lag on that. So we were kind of thinking, how do we go about this, right? We have a SQL database. What can we do about that? And we needed a more attractive solution. So we decided to go shop around, and we went with Aerospike. There was supposed to be a picture comparing SQL and Aerospike, but we can compare countries again. So like I said before, originally the SQL database was super familiar, and that was pretty good. Everyone knew how to use it, but Aerospike we could actually test Aerospike to the limits that we couldn't do with a SQL database, traditional one at least. And Aerospike was a hybrid technology, in-memory NoSQL database, so it was very easy to retrieve documents and have very minimum latency. So to talk about the challenges a little bit deeper, right? We have three main problems. It's speed, we have reliability issues, and we have scalability issues. The first one, speed, right? We want to be able to just like any other company. We want to be able to deliver to our customers with as minimum latency as possible. And when we have data sources, which is what we use to generate custom audiences, and people want to search on that, it was very, very difficult when we have multiple customers trying to do it at the exact same time. And we don't want our customers to see the pending icon for more than like a few seconds. And as Gil mentioned, people were waiting hours. They want to be able to look at, they want to be able to generate a custom audience, and then they want to launch campaigns. They want to see their impressions coming in. They want to see the clicks coming in. They want to do this all in one day. They don't want to have to wait a few days and then explain to the managers why it's taking a while because the platform is taking too long. So the speed was the main issue. The second one was reliability. We noticed that because of like the low latencies and when we got high throughput traffic because of our growing customer base, we noticed some downtime issues with our traditional SQL database, and that's just not acceptable. We never want to tell any of our clients that we have reliability issues. And the third is scalability. And that's very much due in part to the reliability as well as the speed, right? Because when those two are down, you can't scale as much as you actually want to. So it's kind of like a domino effect, and you can't scale to 300 customers when the speed and the reliability is a problem. Is it working? Other than the first slide? He took my clicker. Nice. So there we go, yeah. These were to dig a little bit deeper into the challenges. We had the scalability issues, and we can only kind of, we're limited to a few audiences at a time because our database were getting backed up with the queries, and that, again, was not acceptable. So we were thinking around, and we decided to go with a more efficient solution, a more attractive solution. So you have like the Camry, which is the sequel of cars, right? Everyone knows about Camry. It's super popular. It's familiar. It's easy to drive. But then you can't test the Camry to limits. You can't just go take it to a track, and unless you want to look foolish. And then we have the i8 BMW, which is something we could actually go with high velocity read and write throughputs. And it's a hybrid technology, which is kind of alludes to the hybrid memory usage of Aerospike as well. So our solution was Aerospike, right? And it's been able to keep up and cope with our exponential growth with our customer base. And not only can we actually address the growing custom audience generation, but we were also able to cater to the needs of new customers who were coming into the platform and they wanted to generate new audiences. We could address all of that simultaneously. And another main point of Aerospike is that we were able to do all this with limited resources. We're a startup, so we don't have unlimited resources. We can't just throw a bunch of money at something and expect it to grow. So we have to be a little bit more efficient. We have to be smart about this and see how we can basically get the most out of something for the least input. Thank you so much. Thank you. Awesome, right. And we were able to generate over 5x in terms of our audience generation because it wasn't taking hours, it was taking like seconds or minutes. So we were able to outperform drastically in terms of performance compared to our older solution. And as mentioned before, we were able to do this with a lot less resources because we're constrained on that, and we want to be able to work within our needs and be efficient as possible. So here's a little schematic about how we actually do the implementation. On the left side, you'll see the third-party data sources that we actually partner with. This is what we use to actually generate custom audiences from. So they contain contact information, company information that people want to target. And we run all this through the good old ETL pipeline and clean our data to make sure we have it exactly how we want it. We get some weird URLs in there, so we got to clean all that stuff. And then we turn into MD documents, and each document has a unique ID that we generate based on the contact. And then we stick it into Aerospike database clusters, and its partition key is by the unique ID. And then we have a search engine that is basically indexes on top of the Aerospike, and it's interval indexing. So anytime you insert one, it has a full text search, and it automatically gets updated on the search engine. And this is done real time. So and it's done automatic, so we don't actually have to manually do any sort of indexing ourselves. We just have to turn it on once, and then we're good to go. So the platform side, say they want to generate a custom audience. What do they do? Say you want to target software engineers in America for companies who have at least $1 billion in revenue. So you put those criterias, and you send that to the API that on our search engine, and it would use it would do the full text search, and it will return all these document IDs that actually match those search criteria. And then once you get those document IDs, you go back to Aerospike, and then you'll retrieve those contacts. You retrieve those contacts that are associated with those document IDs, and then you get a list of those custom audiences, and then we store them and we show it to our customers, and they can start targeting them, running campaigns, experiments, and do whatever they want with it. And they can do this multiple times. They can do all this simultaneously, and it's very efficient. So this yellow and red boxes is like the main improvement that we've actually encountered. So the red makes it really, really easy to retrieve documents, and the yellow, the search engine, makes it really, really easy to search documents. So when you mesh those together, it's really easy to create a well-designed system and able to kind of cater to our customers very easily. So a little bit of configuration. We have a production-ready cluster with a cluster of 3 nodes. So if you go back to that, you'll see those little 3 cylinders. And then we have another copy cluster with 3 nodes. And of course, you always have to have 3 different environments, dev, stage, and production. Unless you're a daredevil and you develop on production, then that's fine too. So we have auto backup. This is just common sense because we have disaster recovery and archival purposes just in case someone decides to go rogue and delete something. And we have auto logging, and this has really helped us with production debugging, so our engineers can see what goes wrong, and they can quickly address that need and make sure there's nothing going on, make sure we can catch anything before our customer sees it. Oops, sorry. And we have the Aerospike management console. And this is just a really useful feature because it gives us kind of like an insight into the hood of some of the key metrics like memory usage, throughput, all that stuff. And it gives us a good overview of what's happening. If we need to change any of the configurations, we could do that as well, and it's very easy. And all this with the DevOps cost of 0, right? Because we don't have to hire a special team of DevOps. We don't have to hire a special IT team to manage, to configure, to kind of like set up everything. We don't exactly have those resources. So Aerospike makes it super easy for us to do all that. Performance, that is one of the main things that we care about, right? Because audiences were taking too long to be generated. So we were able to see 5x increase in performance. In fact, we were able to see more than that. And in terms of storage, we We have about 500 gigabytes right now. Of course, that fluctuates depending on the data sources, when we get it, and the time of the month and stuff. But it's about 500 gigs, and it's only going to steadily increase as we expand. And for the reliability aspect of it, we've seen 99.99% uptime, which is really, really good for us. That's a huge improvement from what we saw with our SQL solution. And our customers are able to see that. Our customers are able to see that very, very almost immediately, actually. So integration. Everyone knows anytime you want to make a switch in system, it's pretty important that you don't change up everything. It doesn't break anything. So how do you make that transition? We use our platform. Our platform uses Java Spring Framework. And there's a Spring Data that actually goes very well with Aerospike. So we didn't actually change up our backend code in any way. Everything merges very quickly. And then our ETL pipeline was written in Python. So we didn't have to change that either. So we just used the Python client library that was offered by Aerospike. And we could connect directly with Aerospike and insert the documents after we get it from our data sources. And then it all became seamless. And as a marketing tech company, it's obvious that we have some industry standards that we have to comply with. So some of that may be making sure user data is well hidden and it's not available to any sort of hacks or anything. So we have encryption on disk, which is has been a very useful feature. We can encrypt the entire disk, or we can maybe just encrypt certain fields like the PIIs and the things that are actually very sensitive information. Future approach. So where do we go from here? Obviously, we want to expand, right? We're a startup, and we're looking to grow. We want to get more data sources, because with the better data sources, the better audience we can give to our customers. And the better audience we can give to our customers, the better they can target, and more impressions and better leads they're going to get. So we want to start growing our cluster size. We also want to start generating more audiences, right? So we want to increase our throughput. We want to increase our queries per second. We want to make sure like as many customers can do simultaneously. Thousands of customers want to come. We don't want to say, oh yeah, we're going to have some sort of latency on that. We want to be able to cater to everyone at the same time. And also, I remember Brian, he kind of mentioned a new AI and ML for Aerospike. So our experiments actually work on an AI platform as well, because they're constantly being refined to optimize for either impressions or clicks or CPL. So we could use the AI and ML for Aerospike and implement the experimentations into that as well. A little recap of how Aerospike has been useful. So what are the three main scopes of switching, right? It was speed, it was reliability, it was scalability. Speed, we saw that we noticed over a 5x increase in our custom audiences. And we were able to get our customers almost immediate results. They could submit a custom audience, get it back in a few minutes, and they can almost immediately launch a campaign. And they can start targeting people in any way they want. With the reliability, we were able to see much more uptime. So we didn't have any sort of any shutdown problems. We didn't have customers emailing us about they weren't able to submit this query or that query because their database was down. And we didn't have to have our engineers take away from their development role and start looking into why this shut down. So everything was a little taken care of as well. And when these two things are taken care of, scalability kind of just comes through as a natural occurrence, right? Once the speed and reliability are taken care of, scale just kind of went through, and we were able to cater to a lot more customers, and they were able to generate much more audiences as well. So now basically we can have our engineers focus on a lot more important things, like arguing about whether to use tabs or spaces in code instead of worrying about databases. So that's it for us. And if you guys have any questions, me and Gil are more than happy to. And she is handing out a mic.
On the previous slide, you mentioned that you extract data from Aerospike and load it to your search system. So can you elaborate on this? What's the process you use to actually extract data, and how often do you do? To extract all of the data?
Are you talking about the schematic?
Yes, this one.
Yeah. The ETL pipeline you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a few data party sources. We got flat files from them. It's not something that happens every day. So the write throughput doesn't have to be ridiculously high. But what we care more about is the read throughput, because that is happening almost like every minute. So we have when we get a new file from our data sources, then we kind of run a script to do the ETL pipeline and then insert into Aerospike. And if the existing contact already exists, it just leaves it alone. Otherwise, it updates it.
For search, because you use inverted index, sometimes you need to do full reindex if you make any changes. Mm-hmm. So do you have this scenario, or you always add new data in the search engine, so you don't use updates?
We have interval indexing, so you don't have to do reindex the entire thing. So when you just put in new data into the Aerospike, our search engine will just pick up the ones that you insert, and then it will just reindex those exact documents.
Okay, so you extract. So your files come in both systems, to the search system and Aerospike, or you're reading Aerospike data to load it in your.
You read an Aerospike into the search engine.
And what process are you using to do this?
We have so currently we're using Azure, so we have some sort of data factory that we use to do the indexing. Yes. So we use the portal and use the UI to do the indexing, and we only have to do it once. Once we set up the interval indexing, and then anytime you insert into Aerospike, it would automatically do that.
So the indexes are not maintained inside of Aerospike, they're elsewhere. Is that how I read this?
Yes.
Where are
the
they?
search engine, right? Yes.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so those are data stores, data structures, et cetera. Where are they maintained and why?
They're maintained right now in Azure.
In Azure?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And why? Well, that is why we. I think Gil can answer that more, because we're using.
Is not where we keep the indexes, it's regulated. But we're using so Microsoft Azure is actually a data ETL tool that we use. That's where we keep all the indexes. Now, when we get the data, we get it usually in batches. We have two ways of ingesting the data. One way is getting it via API, and that's in real time. It's all-the-time updates. The other one is getting it in batches. We get a file update from Insight View and Filminfo and LiveRAM and HG data, so on and so forth. They just give us updates of the file, and then just it finds the delta, and then it updates. That is kind of the way we use the data to perform Azure. What's the name of the product? Do you remember? The Azure product?
It's just Elasticsearch on Azure. Yeah.
Yeah, what I just asked, what was the Azure product? So I have one more question. Since you moved from SQL to Aerospike, right? Mm-hmm. So the data modeling experience must have been a new one. You mentioned that Spring data and all those things, but how did it work seamlessly? Like you have to go to a new paradigm for data modeling, and sometimes even Aerospike help is needed to extract all the value that is there in the hardware and software to do proper data modeling. So what was your data modeling experience when you moved from SQL to Azure?
Sure. Yeah, of course. The way you retrieve data from MySQL SQL is innately different than Aerospike. Yeah, of course. So we did have to rewrite some of the APIs that we use to target or to hit the database clusters. But the more seamless aspect of it was the actual integration of the database and our platform. Because of the Spring data and our Spring platform, they work seamlessly. As the transition from Aerospike as the NoSQL from MySQL, that was obviously a little bit different. But in terms of the actual integration of it was
So Spring Data, are you using any kind of JPA facility, or
JPL.
how exactly you are using Spring Data? Like Spring Data working on top of a KV store or doc store? How?
I believe we're using DocStore. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can add. So you use Azure. So use built-in Azure search engine. Like and Azure has also key value store similar to Aerospike, kind of building. I think it's big data or whatever. Have you considered kind of using all the Azure provided databases and search together instead of using kind of piecemeal approach? And what's the benefits of using?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you want to keep it in the same platform, right? If you're using Azure. So we moved to Azure. So we have the search engine on Azure, but we also noticed that the Aerospike was giving a lot more performance improvements compared. So I think you're talking about Cosmos DB. Yeah. So Cosmos DB is one of the NoSQL ones in Azure. So we actually, I think just as you talked about in the last Adobe presentation, we had some of our own benchmarks as well, and we ran some of like a few million queries to see how that would actually return back, and we noticed like a pretty decent improvement on the Aerospike side versus the Cosmos DB side, and we decided to make that call.
So my question is more around internal indexing.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say what is your read frequency of these data sources?
Like when the platform hits.
When you're reading, how much data you are reading and how frequently you are reading it?
Sure. So that varies quite frequently. If you're searching for software engineers in America, then you're obviously going to get quite a bit of data back. So custom audiences, they're getting built. How would you say, like frequency-wise?
So probably a few a day.
Yeah.
Right. So based on this, you're storing that data into Aerospike, but your indexes have to be refreshed, right? Otherwise, your search queries will be not performing to the level they should be, right? So coming back to his question, which he asked around 5 minutes back, like how Aerospike is helping you doing your business better or search and indexing. I'm trying to understand where Aerospike is helping your use case.
So we don't actually store the custom audience in Aerospike, right? We store the data sources that we use to build the custom audience. We return the custom audience to the platform, and we store it somewhere else. But so say you want to actually, like I said, software engineers in USA, and the full text search will be able to return all the document IDs that are stored within Aerospike. And you use those document IDs from the platform to retrieve those. And because it's a NoSQL database key value, you can get those results much quicker than, say, a SQL database. Even if you like index and shard it, it's still going to be much quicker to get it based on a key value pair. So that's how we're getting the actual context of the custom audiences. We're not storing the custom audiences back into Aerospike. Yeah.
Your Elasticsearch is the main data store, and your metadata is in Aerospike. That's what I'm gathering.
Metadata is in Aerospike?
Like
Oh yeah. Yes.
Haha. Can you just talk about like what your transaction volume is like during one of those queries? Like, it sounds like you're doing like a bunch of lookups, but it's hard for me to get a sense of like what read throughput you actually need.
The usage from the system.
Yeah, like from the platform API, right? You're querying for doc IDs, requests per second, how much data you're retrieving, what the structure of those queries are.
So perhaps Prithvi can speak about exact numbers, but we have, there are a few different types of kind of data transactions in the system. The first one is the one that Prithvi was referring to, that's creating the audiences. So imagine we have something like maybe like 100, around 100 columns of different attributes of the different companies and the people that you can go after. So it's the job title, the group on LinkedIn, their skill set, their gender, their age, their seniority, technologies, back-end, front-end, so on and so forth. So that's why we store it in a separate place, because otherwise it will be very inefficient. Then there's also the data that we get from actually executing those campaigns. So the email opens, the impressions, the clicks, those get to 1 million a million rows for per minute. And so we store the different data marts actually contain the end data. In Aerospike, the actual key value transaction, that depends on the usability, and usually customers run about, I would say, maybe 4 or 5 custom audiences, either refreshes or new ones, every day per customer. And then in terms of the campaigns, that really depends on their operation. So we have a customer like Nutanix who is running 2,500 campaigns a month through the platform, and so that's, that ends up being a very, very large throughput. And then most of the customers, like the mid-market companies, like an Aerospike, would run more like 50 campaigns per month. Do you want to speak a little bit more about perhaps the actual throughput, like the number of rows? Do we have that?
The number of rows. Are you talking about the numbers of rows returned, or
Yeah,
or like custom audience per transaction?
For sure.
So yeah, they can range anywhere from like a few thousand. Sometimes we've had like a few million. So it really varies on like the search criteria that you actually pass in, and the number of times you actually do that. So if you're doing like you're trying to build 3 custom audiences at once. So now you have 3 hitting, and you're probably returning millions of rows.
Would it be fair to say that your workload on Aerospike is pretty bursty, like because it's with respect to requests that take a lot of transactions to satisfy?
Yeah. So if you look at the graph, it's pretty like spiky. It's not like almost every second there's something going on. So it is like very spiky. So it's those spikes that we actually want to account for.
Right.
So even if it's any database satisfies the low end, but we want to be able to account for any sort of spikes at any given time.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So do you use Aerospike only for to work together with the search engine, or do you also use it for something else?
Currently, that's what we use. We use it for the search engine to actually index on top of it, and then also retrieve the custom audiences based on the document IDs that you get back from the search engine. Of course, the future approach slide, which we talked about, we kind of want to expand this. We want to run experimentations, ML campaigns on there as well. So since we're going to be running thousands of campaigns for each customer, we want to be able to retrieve the information about them as quickly as possible so we can optimize efficiently as well.
All right, thank you.